Yeah, believe I am live right now. So I'm just getting set up, guys and gals. It's way early, but I'm nervous about this one because I'm in a different facility. I'm at our experience center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and um, they've got a hunk of computer here that is like screaming. And so, Steve Fromming, you're going to be jealous because I'm ordering a new Stream Deck, and probably, I think tomorrow delivered to my house is like an $8,000 computer that they bought me, which is like the highest end computer, desktop computer. And I have no reasons why I will have any problems with microprocessor speed. So I am just getting things set up. So Donnie hasn't called in yet, and I'm just going through all of my different settings. So bear with me. And if you're in early, then hey, it's what it is, way it will go. All right. So Joseph, Camus. What? I don't see. So I don't know. Joseph, can you hear me? Joseph, Camus. Oh. So on this live stream here, I'm running WebEx as well as YouTube. So can you hear me, Joseph? Use the chat, bud. All right. Hopefully, we got man, we got a little bit of everything going on here. Donnie hasn't called in yet. I've got four monitors. I don't know where to look. I know this is monitor 1. This is monitor 2. This is where Donnie will be, and this is monitor 3. That's where the PowerPoint is. And for those of you on for those of you who are on WebEx, I can share different screens. So I'm going to try sharing. I'll move this over here. And I'm going to bring up the UL product spec, and I'm going to try sharing a different screen. Share content. And share this screen, which is the UL, hopefully that doesn't screw things up. I'm going to share content and go back over to the presentation. So that should be good. Hopefully everybody can hear me on WebEx, but there's only one person on WebEx. How do I get back to my live stream? YouTube. Oh, it's over here. All right. So stay tuned, everybody. Still getting things ready. Oh, I know what I need. I need to put in the slide deck. I need to put in sign-in code. Edit it. I'm going to do that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to another. Oh, my PowerPoints are over there. Okay. Go to www. All right. If you've dialed in already and you're watching this, you are probably going, what is going on with Tom? But I am just trying to get things ready. So bear with me. Insert shapes. I've got an excellent connection. I don't know why the bit rate's coming up different. I don't know. Text. So go to www.menti.com. Enter code 889855. I'm going to change the text color and the size. Look at that, and it's right there on the screen. Is that cool? That's cool. All right. We got Roy Lee Brown's dialing in one now. We got Joseph. So menti.com, enter 889855 for sign in. And I will center that. Okay. And then I'm going to copy. Well, I'm not going to. We're going to do the sign out later on. All right. I'm going to type it in over here. Menti code for sign in is 889855. Go to www.menti.com. Okay, so I've got a low bit rate. I don't know why. I'm just gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put this over here. Ouch. Sorry about that. I'm gonna open up another browser. We're talking service entrance equipment today with Donnie Cook, and hopefully you guys and gals will find it beneficial. Got a great sign in. Sign in so far, so I'm gonna mute you. Just be well. Let me take a look. Let me unmute. All right. Okay. Well, that's not too bad. And I am early. Whoop, I am early. I got to remember where I'm at here. So let's go back over to Facebook because I haven't started streaming yet on Facebook, but I will. This will go live on Facebook. It will go live on YouTube. And we're setting up a YouTube channel for the Alabama Central Division, which will be going live soon. And this will be the first video that we will upload. So that's a good thing. Darn good thing. My stream health is good. 60 feet per second. Frame rate. 4.5 megabaud. I got a fat pipe. And I have a big hunk of computer sitting under this desk that is streaming live and doing a great job. So, all right. Stream setup, stream health. I'm not going to go live yet. Facebook. Streaming there. I've got the Mentimeter, so use the Mentimeter codes to sign in, everybody. If you've not, if you have not participated in one of my sessions, all right. If you haven't participated in one of my sessions, the way we do business is CEU credits are going to be given to those who have registered at the Eventbrite. So what I'll do is, let me just go to Eventbrite. We created a registration at Eventbrite. Those who registered at Eventbrite and entered all of your information, combined with the sign-in with this Menti code. So you'll want to, if you've not done this before, open another little browser window on your computer and go to menti.com, which is, I believe, showed on your screen. If you're on YouTube right now, you'll see the Menti code down below. If you're on WebEx, you will see the Menti code on the screen. You can't see me, and you won't see me on WebEx unless you go out to YouTube. So the only person you're going to be able to see on WebEx is Donnie Cook. So in any case, sign in on. So for those of you who are on YouTube and who have not registered, if you want CEU credits, you're going to have to register at Eventbrite. I am going to put the link in the YouTube chat window here as soon as I get it. Bear with me. I see a lot of people. We're getting participants in on. Make sure we don't have. So I got to send Donnie Cook a post. Why did I open my computer? Why did I open my phone? I don't know what I was doing. Oh, man, I am. I think that was a senile moment, showing my age. Manage events. Donnie Cook. Live now. I'm on the system. All right, so I'm going to. We almost got 100. We got 165 people registered. So that is great. I'm going to my. Hey Ryan, how's it going, buddy? Ryan Jackson in the house, y'all. Awesome. So if you didn't register and want CEU credits, please register. V. Go, and that link should work. All right, we got 21 people out there on YouTube land. Thanks for joining us early. I am cookless, Johnny Cookless, but that's okay. He will be joining us. Tested this morning a little bit. We're gonna have a good discussion. We've got some people out there on WebEx. Hey, Ashley, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. I can't see you, but I can see your name. So, and I see you're on your phone. That's a good thing. Thanks for joining us. We got Roddy Brooker, we got Kent Banks, we got Joseph, we got Roy Lee Brown. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who are joining on WebEx, please go to menti.com and sign in. So the Menti, I use the Menti site as that, it's like having that, Susan Newman scarcely says, age is a matter of the mind. That's right. But Susan, when my mind starts to go, then what does that have to say, right? But I use Menti as the sign-in. It's like having that table at the back of the room whenever we do sign-in, when you come into the room. So I use the Menti code that tells me you are here at the beginning. I will have a Menti code at the end, which will be different than the Menti code at the beginning. So be mindful of that. That I will have a different Menti code at the end. So you're going to do sign in, go to menti.com and sign in. And then at the end, I'll show a different code. You'll go to menti.com and you'll sign out. And how we do the CEU credits, if you've registered, which if you're on YouTube coming in and you're just relying on the channel, please go to that link that I've put in the chat box and register. There's Donnie Cook getting my laptop connected. Oh man, he's making me nervous. Can you hear me, Joseph Juicy? Okay. But Ashley. But in any case, so in any case, I use the Menti as a code for both of them. Call from Santa Rosa, California, and sorry, sir, but I cannot take that. Hopefully. Okay, got 23 people out there on YouTube. Thanks for joining in. We got Susan out there. We got Ryan Jackson in the house. We're going to be talking service entrance equipment. I'll tell you what, Donnie Cook put together some good questions. Should have sent the question. Didn't. And it's not on that computer. Well, sorry about that. The registration for service equipment just came through, so you're still, that's right. Thanks a lot for joining, for registering. If you're on YouTube, check my little link I put there. So I just saw a, I like these watches, but I don't like these watches. They keep vibrating on my hand and it drives me crazy. All right, so I got to keep watching for Donnie because I muted everybody as they come in. Donnie says he's Diego Carazo Coronado, Costa Rica in the house. Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Awesome. I don't know if David Englehart's online or Steve Froming. I don't know if Froming was on there earlier. My stream health is healthy. My audio bit rate lower than the recommended. But it is. That's okay. So when Donnie gets in, we will test his connection out. And right, Costa Rica's in the house. Good stuff. We got 24 people out there. Got the WebEx go. So this, I don't know if you guys remember, if you've been around for my programs, you remember early on I was doing both WebEx and YouTube. Well, here's what I learned, that in the WebEx world, when you're doing WebEx and YouTube and you're using a HP EliteBook, not a good idea. Man, it's trying to get him to log in. Cancel that. You don't have to. Well, we got Mexico. Awesome. Thanks for joining us from Mexico. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I got a voicemail from my 707, so whoever was in California, I know who it was. We got a project going on in California. I believe it's in California. Yeah, it's in California. They've got questions around ground fault circuit interrupter protection in other than a dwelling unit, in a kitchen. So I'm trying to help the design engineer get through that. Still don't see my buddy. I'm gonna call Donnie. Bear with me. Hey, what's going on? Wait. Oh, you know what? I wonder, are you hitting the right one? Where did you get the link at? Oh no, it's a different one. Yep, hold on. It's in your. We got 23 people on YouTube watching right now. I haven't gone live on Facebook yet, and we've got a handful on WebEx. So they're filing in. We even got Mexico. No, that's not the the Eventbrite. Yeah, the Eventbrite is just registration, so they've all gotten an email, and they're either on YouTube or they're going to come in on WebEx. Well, we've got Toronto, Canada. We got Mexico. We got Costa Rica. This is pretty cool. That's on YouTube. We got Ryan Jackson, huh? There you go. Are you in? We got Ryan Jackson, Roy Lee Brown, Taylor. No, you don't. Oh, it's on the invite. Oh, you do? There you are, Donnie Cook. Yeah, use your computer. There you go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Donnie?
Oh yeah, I got you now. I hear you on the computer.
Okay, you can hear me on the computer. I just hung up with you.
Yeah.
So say something.
Good morning or afternoon, I guess it is.
Good morning. All right. We got you. So let me look at your audio. So why don't you? I'm gonna increase your audio a little bit. Give me a Alabama howdy.
Howdy.
There you go. You actually did it. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you can see the presentation, right?
Yes.
Now turn your camera on. Got to get that going.
It says my mic is muted.
No, I unmuted you, so I can hear you. Get that camera.
There we go. Start my video.
Oh, there you are. You're over here. Okay, so I'm gonna pull you over. Oh no, I reserved a room for you right here. All right, so I am going to. Oh yeah, this is very clear. Don't move. Whatever you do. Now I gotta go to. Oh yeah, there you are. You're already on the screen. me it. Right. So this watch bigger. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through my screens. That's Donnie Cook. And then there's, oh wait. So for those of you who are looking for Menti code, I'm just going to run through some screens here for a second. So that's you and me, kid. That's you and me with the presentation below. Now you can't see this, Donnie, so this is only for the YouTubers out there in the world.
Oh, okay.
There's 3 tight. And then I got one, and then where's 1? Oh, okay, so I did was, this is 1 with guest. There we go. And then this is just 1. That's you and me. There's you and me. This is just the guest. So that should have your name at the bottom. And this is just me. And then this is you and me only. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to do 3 tight. That'll be the presentation. That's for the 2 bland people. And I think that all looks good. But I'm going to go back to my live. And for those of you on YouTube, if this is your first time coming to one of my programs on YouTube, below me and Donnie are is the Menti code. And what you do is you just open a different browser or click a different tab, go to www.menti.com, which should be on the screen down there scrolling for you. Go to www.menti.com, enter that code 889855, and you'll just put in your information, your first name, last name. I think I put company and your email address. I believe that's all I ask for. And that's a sign-in sheet. That's just like having that sheet of paper at the back of the room where you put your name in. If you're interested in CEU credits and you've come in on YouTube without registering for the event, which is possible, you'll look in the chat window. You'll see where I put in the link to the Eventbrite code, and you can click on that and register. And what we'll do is basically those who have registered, who have signed in, and then who have signed out at the end, which this is a 2-hour program, you will be eligible for a 2-hour CEU credit, which is from the International Association of Electrical Inspectors. And this is an central, correct me if I'm wrong, Donnie, a Central Alabama chapter division of the IAEI. Woo! That's a mouthful. All right. So we got some people coming in on, all right, so the David Engelhart, so they can see you. We got William Loza from Toronto, Canada. So you know what, Donnie, one of my pictures is the Canadian service entrance equipment. So panel board, or I guess they call it a load center, but it's still a panel board. So my Canadian friends will be able to, at least William Loza will be able to say, yeah, that looks familiar. We can talk a little bit about what they do in Canada as well.
All right.
Yeah. Because you know what we are, Donnie? We are international.
We are.
We've got Mexico in the house. We've Costa Rica. We've got Canada, United States.
Shelby County.
Shelby County, is that in the United States?
It's a foreign land, Thomas.
Do they have electricity down there? I know in West Virginia, we still haven't gotten it.
Yeah, we got it. We got it, Thomas. We got it.
All right. So for those of you online too, whether you are on WebEx or on YouTube, we will be speaking to the 2020 version of the National Electrical Code. So I know everybody has their book. And since we're talking service entrance equipment, I know you all have opened to Article 230. So make it happen. Boy, Donnie, I tell you, I got something else. I got 4 monitors going. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go have us go live on Facebook too right now. So welcome to those. I'm gonna make sure I get it right. Only 218. So welcome to those who are on just joining us on Facebook. So thanks for joining us if you're out there. If you're not, I know you will be. For those of you who might be joining us on Facebook, again, you can watch the program totally free. We are providing CEU credits, but I've already put out the link for Eventbrite for registration. You need that registration to be, plus the sign in and sign out to be able to receive CEU credits. But we are going to be talking service entrance equipment. With me, I got Donnie Cook. This is the Central Division of the Alabama Central Division of the International Association of Electrical Inspectors. Event. Miss. Confusing. I got my minimize that. All right, so we've got defroming. So I do not need to log on WebEx if I registered on Eventbrite and Menti and can stay watching on YouTube. That is correct, Steve Froming. So if you've dialed in on YouTube, you've registered, we've got the Menti code. You will sign in. We're going to do the Menti code at the end. You will sign out. The Eventbrite registration plus the Menti code in and the Menti code out, that will get you CEU credit. And the reason the registration is important is because Donnie needs certain information to send to the IO down to Texas. I guess it would be, who would that be, Donnie? That would be either Keith Laughlin or Jody Wages, right? They would make sure that we crossed our T's and dotted our I's and keep all of that file on record.
That's correct. And for the folks in Alabama that that need credit with the Alabama Electrical Contractors Association, if you would make sure that Regina has your Alabama Electrical Contractors license number. If you've signed in before, she probably already has it, but if this is your first time, you need to make sure that Regina gets that information so we can get you credit with the state.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I think, Donnie, if we had this discussion a little bit ago, I had it with other people as well, because we're talking about doing something like this for the Western Section meeting, and the IAEI CEU certificates are widely accepted, but there are some states that require some additional steps. So just because we're getting a CEU credit, depending upon where you're at, because we're on YouTube, we're in Mexico, we're in Canada, we are in Costa Rica. The jurisdiction that you're in may or may not accept that CEU credit. So just be mindful of that as we go through this. But believe me, you will not waste these next 2 hours because we are going to have a great discussion. All right, so we're getting we got William Pennell online. We got Brian Jackson, Roy Lee Brown, Paul Dabrowski. The Dabrowski man is in the house. Thanks for joining us, Paul. I'm telling you, Donnie, we got some guns on here. We got Ashley Bryant from Siemens. We've got Paul Dabrowski, the man, the legend, Ryan Jackson, Taylor Morrow, Kent Banks, Archie Bissett. Right. We got Country Hits USA. I don't know what that on YouTube. That is Country Hits USA. Tim McClendon. Awesome. See what we got. Costa Rica. Ryan Jackson, Susan, and we got Susan on YouTube. Susan Scarsey. Excellent. And I'm going to go out, Donnie, to I'm going to go to the Mentimeter just to make sure we're getting people logged in. And export results to Excel spreadsheet. One folder. Uh-oh, I lost your video. What'd you do, Donnie?
I still see myself.
Oh, hold on.
Just you, Thomas.
Oh, I think I know what's happened. Hold on. There might be someone else who turned on their camera. CP. So if you're coming in on WebEx, please turn your camera off. So CP, there we go. Donnie Cook. How do I pin you, Donnie? Um, William, can you turn your camera off, buddy? Doesn't look like I can turn cameras off. There you go. Thanks, William. Now, Donnie, I've got to figure out how to get you back, buddy. Cook. Oh, Donnie. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something. Where the heck did I lose you? That's CP. Whoop. All right, so I'm just looking at registration. I got people registered, so we're getting people registered. That's a good thing. Close that. Close that. All right, Donnie. What time is it? Got about 5 minutes. Can't get you. Why don't you say something, Donnie?
What you want me to say, Thomas?
Well, I was hoping that you would show up. So here's what I'm going to do.
I can see Donnie fine.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I'm going to do a display capture. Nope.
You want me to get Deanna to call you and help you, Thomas?
No, that's okay, Donnie. Oh, here we go. Boy, with like 4 monitors, it's ape. All right, so this would be display monitor 2. Oh, here we go. Hit OK. And then I am going to do this. Alt. That. Alt. That. Alt. Right, we're getting there. Okay. Take that and say delete, remove. Yes. There we go, Donnie. I got you back, buddy. My YouTube people have got you back. I see. I'm going to go up to our guest, and I got to change this too. So bear with me. Move. Yes. Add display capture. Window capture. Nope, cancel. Delete that. Move, yes. Bear with me. Not a video capture, not a media. I want to do a display capture. There we go. Display capture, there it is. And then I'm going to do a Alt. There we go. Now hopefully no one else comes in because it'll screw all that up. All right, so that's that. Let's just try here. Play monitor 2. Alt. Hey, I could do that too. I didn't have to do a display capture. All right, so 3 tight. Alt. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right, see that, Donnie? We did it. Okay, so for those of you who are coming in either on WebEx or on YouTube or now on Facebook, go to www.menti.com and put in the code 889855. That will get you your sign-in sheet. So that'll be your sign-in for the CEU credits. But again, CEU credits are only going to be made available for those who have registered in Eventbrite, because the information that's in Eventbrite is what's needed, that Donnie needs for the IO, for the International Association of Electrical Inspectors.
Thomas, they for the last web meeting that we did, IAEI actually emailed those certificates. I think they were in a PDF format to the email addresses that were provided. So that rather than sending us paper certificates, they just emailed them. So that's how these will
Perfect.
be delivered also, as far as I know.
That is that's perfect, Donnie. That's good to know. So and that's how I would typically do mine as well. So those on the call that have been to one of my programs on YouTube and or WebEx will probably be done in a similar fashion. So I see we got Kevin Arnold on the phone. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. You know, Kevin is the brains behind this whole thing. So Kevin's going to help answer some of the questions too, Donnie. So if there's stuff that comes up around product, and I see we've got Ashley from Siemens on here as well. So we're getting we got Paul Dabrowski. I mean, geez, we got a good lineup on this program. So that's good. Real good. Hey, thanks a lot, Ryan. You're the man, buddy. I got to figure out. I don't know what I would do without you, buddy. We got Felix Sandoval. So glad that you are joining us, Felix. So we got Christopher Salisbury on board. So Taylor Galbraith, if you scroll up, if you haven't registered on Eventbrite, you need to register on Eventbrite and then use the Menti code, menti.com, to enter 889855 or sign in. And we're going to do the same thing at the end with a different Menti code so that you, I have a snapshot of you at the beginning. I have a snapshot of you at the end, and we've got the Eventbrite registration. What time is it, Donnie? It's 2:32. We're 2 minutes overdue. All right, Donnie, we are live and we are ready to start service equipment presentation. Donnie, why don't you do an introduction of yourself for everybody? I know everybody, probably some people know you, but others may not.
Okay, I'm Donnie Cook. I'm the Chief Electrical Inspector in Shelby County, Alabama. And I'm a member of Code Making Panel 17 and now a member of the Correlating Committee. And I've been IAEI Central Alabama Division Secretary for a long time, decades.
Decades. Yes, and
They're
Donnie,
looking for a new one. If you want to volunteer, they're looking for a new secretary.
there we go. Alabama chapter's looking. Alabama division, right? Or is it the?
Central Alabama Division.
Yep, looking for a new secretary. Is that what it was? Secretary?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. All right. Good. And so my name's Thomas Domitrovich. I'm with Eaton, and I am on Code Making Panel 2, and I am on Code Making Panel 10. So I would ask those of you on WebEx to please mute your phones. Hold on,
Oh,
somebody
yeah,
is not
about
muted.
7 seconds.
Got you covered, Billy. All right. So my name is Thomas Domitrovich. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Pennsylvania. Received that under the state of confusion, and after which I was in the state of intoxication. So I sit on Code Making Panels 2 and 10, and this discussion that we're going to have today is going to be a lot of fun. And I always love. I miss Alabama, so I usually get down to Alabama, and me and Donnie go on inspections, and we get to talk and chat. But and I get to see everybody. But in a social distancing world, we have to do these things electronically. So. All right. Well, Donnie, I think we pulled together a pretty good program, and time will tell on that one. I say we start off, and then in usual fashion, we're doing this in question and answer type of a program. So the first question is service equipment an NEC defined term. So Donnie, why is it important that we have terms like? Why is it important to define service equipment before we even get into the definition?
Thomas, as we look around in the NEC to other places, there's a lot of additional requirements that point the user and say, do this or that at the service equipment. And so if we don't know what the service equipment is, then we might get confused about where we need to, where or what we need to do to another part of the installation. So I thought that was an easy question. And I thought we'd be able to find a definition, and that everybody would know, everybody would recognize it. And I realize that when we go to job sites, in many cases, you ask folks, where is the service equipment? And sometimes they know, and sometimes they don't.
Yep.
And I thought I knew, and then sometimes I'm not sure if I do or not.
You know what's funny, Donnie, is when you sent that, I was thinking, boy, when you sent up the questions, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start putting in some code language, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a great way to start the whole program out, because it's a definition. It's really simple. But the more I looked at the definition, I see why you put that in, because there's some challenges there, and I'm looking for the definition right now. Service entrance service equipment is basically what we're looking at, and it did change in the 2020 cycle just recently, right? So let me just go to the next slide here, and I got a picture of I guess a piece of service equipment. What are those wires going through the meter socket hole?
So that's the cable TV and the telephone circuit that's stubbed out of the wall, and I think they just got them up out of the mud, stuck them in the meter socket until they get ready for the meter.
Okay, all right. So that would be an example of service equipment, right? Because it would probably meet the definition. Let's take a look at the definition. This is out of Article 100. Service equipment is the necessary equipment consisting of a circuit breaker or circuit breakers or switches and fuses and their accessories connected to the serving utility and intended to constitute the main control and disconnect of the serving utility. Now, Donnie, when I think of service equipment, I think of that picture that we just had. Okay, that to me is service equipment. But when I read the definition, it's not as clear as you would think, is it?
Yeah, does it include the box? or the enclosure,
Now,
or the meter box, or the meter enclosure? What
right,
is
so
the service equipment, Thomas?
I know, I love when you ask me questions. So when I look at this, it says necessary equipment. So when I think of equipment, equipment is defined in the National Electrical Code. Equipment is defined as a general term including fittings, devices, appliances, luminaires, apparatus, machinery, and the like used as a part of or in connection with an electrical installation. So a circuit breaker is equipment, right? Panel board is equipment. That meter enclosure was equipment. But then when I looked at the rest of the definition, it says consisting of a circuit breaker or switch and fuse and their accessories. So it implies to me that the accessories they're talking about are for the circuit breaker and the switch and fuse. But it doesn't say anything about the enclosure that it's in. And I highly doubt, I don't believe that, and you and I talked about this earlier, Donnie, that a panel board is an accessory of a circuit breaker. And I don't believe that a panel board is an accessory of switches and fuses or an enclosure. So that sort of, when I think about how we use this term service equipment throughout the National Electrical Code, to me it sounds like I'm only talking about the overcurrent devices or the switch and the fuse, but in reality, I believe it's the entire enclosure. You agree with that?
And I think that's probably what many of us have applied through the years. We considered the entire enclosure and everything inside to be the service equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so I went back over and I looked at the definition of service. And service is the conductors and equipment connecting the serving utility to the wiring system. So that, if I'm just talking about that enclosure, which will be listed and labeled as service equipment.
No, it's listed and labeled as suitable for use as service equipment.
But it could be listed as service equipment. It could be suitable for use, which means I can convert it, right? I mean, I have to put the jumper in, or if it is service only use as service equipment, then I would have the jumper fixed in there for you for the main bonding jumper, etc.
And then it would be suitable for use only as service equipment.
Correct. Yes.
So is that the enclosure, or is that?
That's the entire, that's that in that. If I think about a panel board, we don't label the circuit breaker or the fusible switch as suitable for use as service equipment. We label the panel board, or we label the transfer switch or the motor control center or whatever that piece of equipment is, and in its entirety, as either suitable for use as service equipment or suitable for use as only service equipment, right? So one of those two. Now, when I look at, if you look in Article 100, there's a lot of definitions around service. So it reminds me of, we were just shooting a video here in the Experience Center on grounding and bonding, and we were going through the whole discussion of solidly grounded, ungrounded, and equipment grounding conductors, and there's so many definitions on grounding and bonding. It reminds me of the definitions on service equipment and cables and conductors, etc. So there's a lot of terms in the NEC that, and I think you covered this in your last Alabama division meeting, right, Donnie, about recognizing all the parts?
Yes, that meeting was on services, feeders, and branch circuits and taps, and so we started going through some pictures, and some of those we may see again today in some of the slides about trying to identify what is the service equipment and what is not service equipment.
Right. So then the other aspect of it is, how do we handle the surge protective device? There's a new requirement in 23067 that dwelling units have to have surge protection in all your service equipment. So it says that the SPD shall be an integral part of the service equipment or shall be located immediately adjacent thereto. Now, if I interpreted service equipment based on that definition as the overcurrent protective device, the breaker, or the fusible switch, then that would tell me that my SPD would have to be an integral part of either the switch, fusible switch, or the circuit breaker, which is not accurate. It could be an integral part of the assembly, like the panel board or the motor control center or the transfer switch, but it would not be an integral part of the overcurrent protective device. I mean, it can be, it's not required to be. I think that's, to your point, Donnie, it's important to understand the definition of service equipment because you got to apply these things correctly.
So that requirement, Thomas, for the surge protective device is in Part 5, which is service equipment general.
Oh,
Which
so,
somewhat leads you to believe that the surge protection is part of that or a piece of that.
so wait, hold on. You're saying it's in Article 230, but it's in Part 5, which is service entrance. No, that's 4.
Service equipment general.
Where's 5 at? Service equipment. There it is. Yeah, service equipment general. So we know what the definition of service equipment is.
And then the 67 section is surge protection. And in a simple mind like mine, that would lead me to believe that's a component of the service equipment.
And that would be, and so I think that's accurate, but here's what I think, Donnie. If we look at that definition again of service equipment, in my opinion, this definition needs to be modified a little bit because it implies that the service equipment consists of the circuit breaker and switches and fuses and their accessories, but really the surge protective device would be an accessory for that service equipment from a panel board or a motor control center perspective. The other accessories I believe they're speaking to include that main bonding jumper and the ground terminal, the neutral terminal. You know, you may add other things in there that have to deal with the bonding and whatnot that we would see at our service entrance equipment, right?
Right.
I think that definition probably can use a little love in 2023, in my opinion. You want to go to the second question?
Absolutely.
Review of the term seems to indicate it includes the disconnecting means, overcurrent protection, and their accessories. So we just talked a little bit about that. So we sort of skipped the gun there. When we talk about accessories, if you interpret that definition to say, if we look at the definition, and if we interpret it to say that consisting of a circuit breaker or switches and fuses and their accessories, then you could mistakenly think that it's just the accessories for the circuit breaker or fusible switch. But I think what that definition is really speaking to are all of those other accessories, right? Like your GFPE, possibly, your shunt trip. You have shunt trip capabilities in there to meet some of the code requirements, or the line side barriers, which are required in the NEC. I would throw surge in there as an accessory.
But the surge might also be in a separate enclosure, an additional enclosure.
That's true, because the code does permit, right? In 24067, it says the SPD shall be an integral part of the service equipment or shall be located immediately adjacent thereto, which means it's right there next to it. But there's an exception that says the SPD shall not be required to be located in the service equipment as required in B if located at each next level distribution equipment downstream toward the load. So it may not be an accessory, or it may be. Now, when I think of overcurrent protective devices, I think of accessories like this, handles that you put on the front of a breaker, or if I was going to make a draw out and I had this accessory that I could install a breaker into, that's a handle that's fixed to the front of a breaker. So when you say, or when the code says circuit breakers and fusible switches and their accessories, I think of these. This is zone selective interlocking. This is, I believe, ground fault protection of equipment. And if I think about a fusible installation, this down here is a ground fault relay and an arc flash reduction maintenance switch relay type of deal that's located in that equipment, I would say those are accessories for a fusible switch, but that's not an accessory for the fuse itself or the circuit breaker itself. I think it's a little misleading. I think, in my opinion, where your head stands at, Donnie, but I think these are all different types of accessories you may find in service equipment. The main bonding jumper being, I think, one of the most critical pieces of the pie, right?
Right.
So you supplied this picture for us on, and this is, there's your, I would say that's your main bonding jumper that's tying your neutral and your ground bars together, right? I believe that's what this is.
Yes.
Yep. So,
and so that on the right hand side below the main is the surge.
Oh, that's right here, right?
Yes.
With the two green dots.
And I guess one of the other questions that I had, this particular device, the meter enclosure and the panel board enclosure are the same enclosure. They have two different covers, but they're the same enclosure. We also do services, and I think we've got some pictures in there where we have a meter enclosure and then some sort of conduit fitting between that and either an enclosed circuit breaker or a panel board or whatever it is. And I think there are a lot of people that believe that the meter enclosure is part of the service equipment.
Yeah, and I know we have another question in here somewhere. I might skip ahead if I can find it. Let me just look, because I know there's a section in the code that specifically speaks to whether or not that meter is our meter. There it is. It's question number 9. You mind if I skip forward to that one, since we're talking about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So your question number 9 spoke to our meter enclosure installations, part of the NEC and service equipment requirements. And if you look at 23066B, that's titled meter sockets, it says meter sockets are not considered service equipment, but shall be listed and rated for the voltage and current rating of the service. So to your point, in this image, I've got a meter socket that's integral with the same enclosure, the same panel, that has my service entrance, my breaker, and all of that's listed as service entrance rated, suitable for use probably as only as service entrance, because that's got the meter, and the bonding jumper is integral with that piece of equipment.
And interestingly enough, when we look at the layout of the code, Article 312 includes cabinets, cutout boxes, and meter socket enclosures. So you actually have a different article in the code to cover that.
That's a good point.
And the meter enclosure, whether it's a common enclosure with the panel board or whether it's a separate enclosure with the panel board, the requirements in 312 apply.
All right, so 312 is cabinets, cutout boxes, and meter socket okay. Now, is there any reference in 312 about service entrance equipment? Probably not, right?
Because you are permitted to have the meter enclosure on the load side of the service equipment, and I think some of the pictures that we've got at the end of the program show installations where there's a main, and most of these are going to be a multi-tenant shopping center or a business park or something, and we'll say there's a 1200 or an 800 amp main. There's one. Yeah, so you've got a main, and then you go from the main through the wireway and then to the meter socket. So that's on the load side of the service disconnect. And I'm guessing, unless I'm using the terms wrong, it's on the load side of the service equipment. So the meter socket doesn't have to be part of it.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Now you could also put this meter socket that's ahead of that main as well, and they're listed for that type of application. But like you said, in this case, that's that disconnect switch, which is probably fusible. That's probably a fusible disconnect switch.
Yes.
Provides that protection for all of that equipment downstream. Do you have any other? Do you think there's any other pictures in here that show that? Well, this one here is a little different, but that I guess this is the same thing, right? So that's the fusible disconnect.
No, the conduits coming up on the left-hand side, all the way on the end. Those are the service conductors, underground service conductors that go into the wireway above.
Okay.
And then there's service entrance conductors into each of those 4 meter sockets, and then from there into the 4 pieces of service, what I would have called service equipment, which is the enclosure that the breakers or the fuses are in.
Okay.
So where does the service equipment start and stop?
Yeah. So now in my thought, in my mind,
for you, Thomas.
say what?
I said, I'm glad I picked an easy subject for you.
I know. So if you just looking at this picture here, we know that this switch has to be service entrance. That would have to be service equipment. This would have to be service equipment. This would have to be, because you would have to do your grounding and bonding in each of these enclosures, right?
Right.
And this one too. What's this? Is that a transfer switch?
No, that's the house panel.
That's the house panel.
The main breaker panel board with some circuits for the parking lot lighting and the exterior building lighting and that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. So these meter socket enclosures are on the primary side of those switches.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
And they're separate enclosures.
Yep.
So are they service equipment?
Yeah. No, these meter sockets would not be service equipment, because we know, as based upon what we just saw in 230, that we know that meter sockets are not included as service equipment, but these disconnect switches would be your service equipment, where your bonding would happen. Your main bonding jumper would be in that switch, and then you would have to pull in your grounding electrode conductor into that switch and land it on the neutral bar, right?
That's correct. So back up to the one where the meter and the overcurrent devices are together.
Oh, okay.
The initial one.
Yeah. Go back up. That would be this guy right here. Is this it? No.
Yeah. Yep. So we just said that the meter enclosure is not part of the service equipment.
But it's all one piece of equipment.
They took it all out of the same box. It all came in one box together.
That's right. That's right. But this entire, because this is your main breaker and you'll have the bonding jumper, this equipment in its entirety is considered the service equipment. Now, let's take a look at that language, Donnie. Does it say in 230, does it say that it shall not be, or that
shall not be considered service equipment?
So meter sockets shall not be considered service equipment, but shall be listed and rated. So even though this entire assembly is service equipment, I'm not implying that meter socket is service equipment. I'm implying that this entire assembly is listed as service equipment.
As suitable for use.
As suitable for use, right.
Suitable for use only as service equipment on this.
Right, and we say only because we've got the...
because you can't disconnect the neutral from the enclosure.
Okay. All right, well that is I can see some of the confusion around that. And this is what it looks like in the top portion of that. So we're connecting our neutral here, Our two hots, and that bar goes all the ways down and connects. And then I did notice too that you have the line side barriers, which we will discuss for this. So the top portion of this enclosure can stay closed while we open the bottom door. So I have access to my main overcurrent protective device, and the primary lugs or the line side lugs of that are barriered off per the code. Now, which is now a 230 requirement, not a 408 requirement. All right. Anything else on that one? Because if not, I'm going to go back to question number 3, I think.
Okay.
No, let's do this. Take a look at this picture here.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so this is a transfer switch, which is listed as service entrance, suitable for use as service entrance equipment. And your main bonding jumper is right here, right?
Yes.
So that's the main bonding jumper, and that hopefully came from the factory that way. And you didn't just put that in there. That's a good discussion. Okay, let's say, Donnie, that that was in the box and I threw it away. Would you permit me to just grab a conductor and connect those two together?
Yes, we've permitted that in the past as long as it was sized correctly.
Okay. Okay, and then this white cover is your line side barrier, right?
For some switches, and some manufacturers have already been back to the certification agencies to get their barriers certified.
Mm-hmm.
It was my understanding that there was some sort of a finger probe test that was associated with that. I don't remember if this one was before or after they started doing the finger probe test to make sure that something couldn't get to the terminals over the top of that barrier. It was clearly provided to keep people's hands out of the off those inside terminals, and probably works.
Yep.
The question would be in the certification of barriers, and I don't know that there is one. I thought there would be. The question would be, would that barrier keep the finger probe out of there? It would, if you went over the top.
Yeah, and that's that barrier that we put that in the requirement for that went into 408 as part of NEC 2017, and then it moved into 230. So all service equipment has to have that barrier, and that's typically handled by the manufacturer, which is driven by the performance requirements of the UL standards that we list them to. But to your point, I mean, it's there to prevent unintended contact with energized parts inside that enclosure. But is it's there's no performance criteria, at least in the code, that says that it has to be finger safe or anything like that. It has to meet special requirements, right?
Not in the NEC. So for one of the manufacturers, maybe that's on the meeting, they could put in the chat box whether if they know if there's specific product standard requirements that must be met. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, Kevin Arnold may know. I think he's heavily engaged with the panel board standards. So I don't know, Mr. Arnold, if you have an opportunity to help us understand whether or not, if there's any criteria in the standards that they were looking at with regard to like IP, what do they call it? I think it's IP20 or something like that. The finger safe probes and whatnot. But I'm not aware of any activity there. Now, the other thing too, Donnie, is I think you've recognized this as well, that there are the change went in the code, and in the National Electrical Code in 230 says all service equipment. So there are products that are still trying to catch up with the requirement for service entrance line side barriers. So you might have some transfer switches. Motor control centers, they've been in there for a while. So, and I had this discussion with Matt Hussey out of our motor control center group. We couldn't figure out why, you know, our MCC folks weren't like all nervous about meeting this new code requirement, but MCCs have had to have a line side barrier for service entrance rated equipment for quite some time, as have switchboards and switchgear. It was the addition of panel boards that was new in last cycle, and now we opened it up to, you know, that safety disconnect switch. So if you look at, let's go back down to those images of some of these disconnect switches. These, I guess these aren't switches up here, are they?
No, those are enclosed circuit breakers, and
Okay.
those were not required to comply with the barrier requirement in 2017.
Right, but
Unless it was listed as a panel board, it wasn't required. Panel board or switchboard, switchgear didn't have to meet that requirement, but now an enclosed circuit breaker has the same requirements as a panel board.
right, and so would as another example, that switch. You know, in this case, all of these switches,
Right.
those switches in the 17 and earlier would not have had to have the line side barriers, but in the 2020 version, all of those disconnect switches are going to have line side barriers. And that's an important piece
I
of
think
that.
as we go on through the program, Thomas, I think there's some pictures of fused switches that are open that we might be able to see that as we go
All
move
right.
through the program, through the slides.
Okay, so let's go to question number 3. Is it possible for the disconnecting means and overcurrent protection to be part of the same component, shipped and installed as a single unit, in some cases, and be separate components in others? So, you know, off the top of my head, and I don't know where your head was at, Donnie, but what I'm thinking is that that circuit breaker is the overcurrent protective device and the switch. The
Right.
disconnecting means. That's all shipped as one, right?
Right.
But my fuse, if I did a fusible disconnect switch, I might get the disconnect switch, but the overcurrent protection is shipped separately, or could be shipped separately, or it could be shipped as together, but usually it's shipped separately. So that would be where your overcurrent protection and switching device are not connected together.
You might also have larger equipment where you have relays and that sort of thing to take care of the overcurrent protection and a separate switch.
Oh, that's true. And you know what? And I think that that gets you to the whole discussion of medium voltage, because
Medium voltage, yes.
yeah, more often than not, it's the medium voltage applications where you're going to have that separate relay, which is going to tell the circuit breaker to open, or the fusible switch, because we can have fusible switches too that are shunt tripped, actuated. In fact, in the medium voltage world, there are some fuses that are activated electronically and via the use of a pyrotechnic that's inside the fuse, so I can tell that fuse to open on demand, and that can be done with a relay as well.
Yeah, the relay application is going to probably be very common with the medium voltage.
Yes, yeah, very common. All right, number 4, does the NEC require all service equipment to be enclosed? If so, is the enclosure an accessory of the service equipment? Doing that word accessory. So 23062, service equipment is your reference, and if we look at 23062, there's parent text there that say energized parts of service equipment shall be enclosed. So it's telling us that the energized parts of service equipment shall be enclosed as specified in A, or guarded as specified in B. Why don't we have a reference to C in that parent text, Donnie?
C was an afterthought.
Oh, okay.
It's an easy place to put the barriers.
Well, what is it when you call me and we have issues? What do you call it? Opportunities, right?
Opportunities, that's right.
We have an opportunity to clarify 23062. I think that would be another good public input to
I
reference
think
C.
most people probably understand what it means, but
Yep.
in many cases, while we understand what it means, it may not be exactly what the words say.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if we look at what it says in A, it says energized parts shall be enclosed so that they will not be exposed to accidental contact or shall be guarded, as in B. And I would say, would you say something like this is enclosed?
Yes.
So, and if I have equipment that looks like this, all of that is enclosed. We use big gray boxes to get that done.
Yes.
All right. And this would be an example of a medium voltage, right? So this is, there's your relay. That's a relay right there. These are relays. I'm sorry. This is your relay. I believe that over there is a meter. So you'll see equipment like this that could be service equipment, but it's medium voltage, and there's other equipment. So ways to guard and barrier it.
So one of the things that I don't think we've got in here, Thomas, right at this point is would be outdoor medium voltage primary services where that that service disconnect might be a gang switch on a overhead distribution connection, and it would be guarded because it's located at the top of the pole.
well, wait a second, Donnie. I thought that if it's on that top of that pole, that the utility owned it.
No,
Ah.
they may. I mean, if it's theirs, it's not service equipment.
Right.
It's utility stuff. But if it's customer owned, then it'd be the service equipment.
And you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see that in a residential application, but you probably could see that in a commercial or an industrial application.
Right. We've got those on services for methane gas fields where there's multiple gas wells scattered across acres and acres and acres of property. And they buy service from the utility at 12 kV or 35 kV and do their own distribution, and they have a gang switch at the service. They were a little disappointed about that the first one we did because they had 3 cutouts, individual cutouts, and the requirements in 230 require that switch to open all the ungrounded conductors. So we do have those.
Okay.
I don't know that I've got pictures in there, but we do have some.
All right. That's important to understand that too, because as long as the utility doesn't own it, it falls under the purview of the National Electrical Code, and you'd have to apply these rules whether it's up there on that pole or down on the ground and in a piece of equipment. Now, guarded, it tells us energized parts that are not enclosed shall be installed on a switchboard, panel board, or control board and guarded in accordance with 110.18 and 110.27. And I noticed that David Engelhart asked a question on YouTube, why does 230.62 seem to mirror 110.27? And we have a reference to 110.27, but I think 110.27 goes a little bit further than what you see in 230.62, and 230.62 has special requirements that are only applicable to service entrance or service equipment that might not be required as part of 110.27. And 110.27 is titled guarding of live parts. 230.62 is enclosed or guarded service equipment. So I know we have barriers in here that's in C, which would definitely not be in 110.27.
Yeah, the 110.27 also, it looks like maybe that stops at 1,000 volts. So if you were at if you were above 1,000 volts, then.
Good point. Very good
But there
point.
is a definition in Article 100 for guarded also, Thomas. So you could, you have to go back there and look at that and apply that also.
All right, so I don't know if I put that, I don't think I put that definition, but let's take a look at the definition of guarded, because I know everybody on YouTube and everybody out there on WebEx has their book, their code book, and let's take a look at guarded. That's after R, just so you know. Guarded, covered, shielded, fenced. So I could have a switch that has a fence around it. That would be considered guarded.
That's correct.
Enclosed or otherwise protected by means of suitable covers, casings, barriers, rails, screens, mats, or platforms to remove the likelihood of approach or contact by persons or objects to a point of danger. All right, so guarded does not necessarily mean it's in an enclosure. It could be a switch out in the open, medium voltage or high voltage, depending upon what you're dealing with. And as long as I have a fence around it and I limit the approach by unauthorized people, then I am guarding it.
So the ones at the methane gas fields, Thomas, were on wood poles, probably 40 or 50 foot wood poles.
Okay.
And the handle for the switch was down at grade, but the switch itself and the live parts were on the top of the pole. So you clearly wouldn't walk up to them. You'd have to have a bucket truck or hooks where you could climb the pole to be able to get to it. So I guess in my mind, I would have considered that guarded, and I think it probably does fit into that definition.
Right. Now, Carrie Lovelace asked, would the fence need a top? It wouldn't, right?
I don't think so based on that definition.
Right. As long as I don't have to worry about somebody flying in or climbing over the fence and getting in. As long as I have a fence there. Now, there's nothing that says how tall the fence has to be. Would that be a call by the AHJ? I mean, if I put a little doggy gate down, would you say, oh yeah, that meets the requirements? I mean, does it have to be of substance? I mean, we don't really talk about that in here, do we?
I don't think we provide detail. I think we probably hope and assume the designer and the installer and the electrical inspector would all look at that together and agree that the fence was adequate to keep people from walking up to the equipment and,
Yeah.
and touching it.
Okay.
And so, when you look at, in our area, when you look at utility substations that are outside the scope of the NEC, they all have fences around them. Most of them have, a little bit of barbed wire on the top. Most of them have, most of them are 6 foot tall, or some, they're not 2 foot tall. And so I think you could probably, you would hope that you would have the designer, the installer, and the AHJ would be able to look at it together and everybody say, I think that's guarded. Able to walk away from that. But we don't have clear and prescriptive text, I don't think.
Well, Ryan Jackson just pointed out to look at the definition of enclosure. And this is interesting because when I think of the term enclosure, I think of that big gray box, that metal enclosure. But if you look at the definition, it says the case or housing of apparatus or the fence or walls surrounding an installation to prevent personnel from accidentally contacting energized parts or to protect the equipment from physical damage. So an enclosure does not necessarily mean that it is a metal box that's enclosing a piece of equipment. It could be the fence. It could be the room or the walls around that piece of equipment. And I think that's probably important more so in medium voltage applications where you have that open air installation and you don't have a big gray box to rely on, right?
Yeah, if you looked back at industrial installations from long ago, you know, there were a lot of switches that were open in industrial applications, but they were in a room where everybody walking around couldn't just walk in. It was, you
Right.
know, kept the rooms locked and they were just open switches.
Well, that's
Some of those are still in use.
oh yeah, yeah. And technically, as long as you have that room, it doesn't violate the requirements around being guarded or enclosed because they're in that room. They're in the you have the barriers to prevent personnel from coming in contact.
Right.
Now, once you get in the room, now you're in the enclosure. So, all right, all right. So, anything else about guarded? Because we're going to go to barriers next. And in 23062, this is the part that's new. So the history of this one is and I know we have another question in this regard, but it was over in 408. We moved this up to 230, and so we added barriers shall be placed in service equipment such that no uninsulated, ungrounded service bus bar or service terminal is exposed to inadvertent contact. So, you know what? Before we get off that, I was just looking. Joe Bellantoni, yep, he's referencing 110.31, Donnie.
For the medium voltage.
Yeah, so and that talks about the enclosures for electrical installations, enclosures in a vault, room, or closet. For installations other than equipment is described, wall, screen, or fence shall be used. Oh, there we go. Here it is. So remember I asked the question about the height of the fence, and I said, well, can I put a little doggy gate in front of that medium voltage? This says a fence shall not be less than 7 foot in height, or a combination of 6 foot or more of fence fabric and 1 foot or more extension, utilizing 3 or more strands of barbed wire or equipment. I wouldn't use. You know what I would use? I'd use razor wire. I think that's better. Whew.
So that's probably close to what you would see in utility installations also. We may have some utility folks on the call, but again, I think that if whether you were at medium voltage or at less than 1,000 volts, I think the important thing to realize is that the designer, the installer, and the AHJ look at those together, and they're all three convinced that they're guarded.
Right. All right. All right, that's good. We'll beat that one up a little bit. Look at question number 5. Does the NEC require listing of service equipment? Absolutely not, right? I mean, why would you want to list anything? Come on. Right, Donnie? You're not a big fan of listed products, are you?
So we also allow field evaluated stuff.
Ah. Well,
We're open-minded.
if you look at 230.66, 230.66 is separated into a couple different sections, right? Which we already referenced once at least in this discussion. But A tells us service equipment rated 1,000 volts or less shall be marked to identify it as being suitable for use as service equipment. And it says all service equipment shall be listed or field evaluated. So, Donnie, does that mean I'm looking at a circuit breaker or a fusible switch, or am I looking at the entire enclosure?
That was my question to you, Thomas.
I know. Well, see, I beat you to the punch.
Well, so the reality is there's multiple listed pieces to that. The enclosure is, generally speaking, the enclosure is listed, and the overcurrent device is listed, and the other stuff that's in the box, I guess historically I thought was the accessories until we looked closely at the definition of service equipment. I still believe that's what they probably meant, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what the words say.
Yeah. I think when you're looking at, like, you take this type of this enclosure is I guess a Siemens breaker in a box. I guess it's just a
It's an enclosed circuit breaker. Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the terminology. Closed circuit breaker. And that would be, that entire assembly would be listed as service equipment or suitable for use as service equipment. And
It's listed as an enclosure, and the breaker is listed as a breaker.
well, let
But
me ask
the label in the door says it's suitable for use as service equipment. Doesn't say it's listed for that. It's suitable for that.
Oh,
Because you can take the bonding screw out and use it as something other than service equipment.
where's the bonding screw?
Below where the bare wire is.
So I can't see it
On the
then.
neutral bus. You can't see it from that angle, no, but it's
Okay.
there.
All right, because I was just looking at this and wondering, okay, where is my? So you're saying that the bonding
Main bonding jumper is a screw.
is a screw that's underneath below this existing screw that's right here. And because I'm noticing that this black here looks like it's insulated,
Yeah, it is.
right? So this would be a true case of suitable for use as, because if you don't have that bonding screw screwed in, bonding this lug with the back pan. Oh, wait a second, Donnie. Oh, yes, I can. I can't. Now, this is another important thing from a service entrance. I would be in error if I landed this grounding electrode conductor on this terminal.
That's correct. We find that every day.
Yeah, and the reason is because you would need to have a physical jumper between these two. You can't use the back pan of that enclosure as your main bonding jumper. But if I land my grounding electrode conductor on this lug and I put the screw in, I have bonded the enclosure with my grounding electrode conductor. This equipment grounding conductor is bonded to the enclosure. Everything is Kovacevic. There's a lot to learn on that picture right there.
So let's advance the slide, Thomas. I was trying to remember if there's another shot of that where you can actually see the bonding screw. There's the listing marks. So see, it's the enclosure is listed as a circuit breaker enclosure. The circuit breaker is listed as a circuit breaker.
Oh yeah. But I don't see where it says listed for suitable for use for service entrance equipment.
It's in the label in the door with all that
Okay.
other stuff.
So it would be here.
All that, yes. That provides your torquing information and your size of your conductors that go in the terminals.
I would have thought that it would have been a part of this listing mark here.
No, they're not usually right there. That's usually two different places.
All right. So
Is there another picture going?
No, those are the only two.
That's the only two had on that one. Okay.
Yeah. Let me look down at the others. Maybe I did not include another one here, but it doesn't look like I have any other images of that piece of equipment.
Okay. So can you go back to that first meter main enclosure we had and see if we can find the listing mark in that? It was in the meter section.
Yeah, so let's
And the conductors, I just can't remember if you can see it on the photograph that we had.
look. It is right. I'm trying to find the right image here because it's. Oh, that's not it. Clicked too fast. And I don't. That is
So
way.
one with the cover off the meter the meter component, the meter.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that one too. So let me find that image. Whoop, here it is here.
So behind the black and red conductors right there is the listing mark.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And that will say suitable for use as service equipment?
Oh, that says it's a listed panel board.
Ah, okay.
And then the suitable for use as service equipment is in the label in the door.
In
There you
here.
go. Right in there. Yes.
Okay.
Or that one says suitable for use only as service equipment.
Right. All right. All right. Well, we're learning something every slide. Okay, I can buy it. I can
And
buy it.
interestingly, you know, every one of the manufacturers marks that a little different in a little different way. You got to learn to look for them. That's the reason. That's the reason it takes a long time to do an inspection. You got to find all that stuff.
Yeah. Now you'll see this is our Canadian panel, and you'll notice. I mean, the reason I know this is part of our Canada solution is because you see this barrier right here. There is a cover that goes over this entire top compartment. So you can't get to anything up here, and you're not allowed to pull any wires through that area outside of your service entrance conductors, your service conductors, to land on this breaker. And you'll notice it says right here, suitable for use as service entrance equipment, nice and labeled right at the top. And you could learn Spanish and French if you read some of these labels close. So thought I'd throw that one in there too. Now as far as listing, you know, I went through a couple other areas in 230, and there will be specific requirements for listing requirements for different parts, especially at the service where it's critical. The bonding and connection of all of your equipment it's critical to bond things correctly there. And this talks about that where embedded, so conductors shall be listed or approved for use in wet locations and arranged to drain. This talks about the service head shall be listed for use in wet locations. So you may get things that are listed for service entrance rated or whatnot for use in service entrance equipment, or you listed for wet locations or the type of environment that you have it placed in, right? And then
Right.
what's special about, okay, so I guess we talked a little bit about this, but you know, talk about the listing requirement on service equipment, and we say, well, what's special about that service equipment? And I think the key aspect of it is how we bond this neutral conductor with this equipment, and how those connections and where I land my grounding electrode conductors, right? All of those aspects, that's the key difference, in my opinion, is that bonding between that grounded conductor and the equipment grounding conductor and the grounding electrode connection to earth.
And now with the 2020
Yeah.
edition of the code, the barriers.
Right. Because the barriers are going to be supplied from the manufacturer as part of the equipment. You're not fabricating something in the field. I think that's an important part. I mean, what would you say, Donnie, if I took something like this and you know, the manufacturer didn't supply that barrier to me, and I, you know, fabricated my own little cutouts and put that over there? Would you approve that?
No.
Would have to be identified, right? So that's the difference between listed and identified. Would be a part number from the manufacturer for use in that application.
So that picture right there, Thomas, was an installation from last year based on the 2017 NEC, and that was an enclosed circuit breaker. So at that particular point in time, those terminals were permitted to be there and not barriered off.
Right.
So that installation today would come with barriers in the box if you're lucky. Depends on when the supply house bought the product. If they purchased it last year and still in stock, then it may not have barriers. But so it's one of the blessings or curses of early adoption is that everybody's trying to use up inventory of stuff they've already shipped, and so we We usually get the supply houses to take that to some of our neighboring jurisdictions that haven't adopted the 2020 yet to use up that inventory.
Okay, well, I know, like in the case of myself, from an Eaton perspective, and I'm sure other manufacturers are the same way. If that was a panel board of ours or a load center, in some cases, I can provide those barriers that you could put on that equipment, even though it's not the latest version of that product. That barrier is really a part of that main overcurrent protective device, the main breaker or whatnot. So it could be that if you ask the manufacturer, they could supply you with those barriers, and you don't have to necessarily remove that equipment and replace it all.
That's correct, and that's what they did for a while. The barriers were being sold as a separate piece, and I think probably the majority of them now come in the box when it ships from the factory.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that's a part of the listing. So we got panel boards covered because that was included in the 17 cycle. But I think what you're seeing, and I know you've called me about this already on some things like fusible disconnect switches, transfer switches, and things like that. A lot of those other products that are listed for use as service equipment, the standards may or may not have been kept up to date as quickly as the code changed. So you may have some manufacturers that just taking a little bit longer than others to get equipment on the market. So not that that's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just the facts. That's the way it is.
Yeah, and the other thing that impacts that is just inventory. Where
Right.
if you happen to be buying it from a wholesale supplier that had purchased, a large shipment before the code changed, then they may have a lot of that in stock.
Absolutely. All right. Number 6, does the NEC include requirements to insulate or cover all live parts of service equipment? Is that requirement new? If so, is older equipment with exposed live parts? So this is the discussion that we're having right now. So this question is right in line, and we would be in 230.62 of the 2020 version of the National Electrical Code. In the 2017, it only impacted panel boards in addition to what was already impacted, and that was in 408.3, if I'm not mistaken. Now 230.62, that's a picture of what we do on our larger breakers, because you have multiple conductors landing on a terminal block. You have to be able to handle that a little differently. There's the code reference for the 17 cycle. 408.3 talked about they did was added the word panel boards to 408.3, which expanded the line side barrier requirements. And so, if you think about a residential panel board, it's when I turn that main overcurrent protective device off, the concern is I'm exposed to these unguarded terminals, which, I mean, I don't know if I know I've done it in some applications. We turn that main off, and what do we do? At least here in the United States, I know in Canada they're permitted to turn that panel board on its side, and they barrier off this entire top portion. So you're not allowed to do what you're seeing right now in Canada, because you're not allowed to bring all of these conductors down through the top portion of this panel board. But what we do today is, if we're going to add a circuit, we're going to turn off this breaker. We're probably not going to call the utility just because we're adding a circuit. We're going to turn that main breaker off, and then we're going to pop a hole, and we're going to bring a conductor where? Right down past these energized exposed lugs. So this requirement that went in the 17 cycle, I know it was what they do in Canada was a stimulus for this activity, but we put the requirement in for these line side barriers in this area here. So now I am no longer exposing the electrical worker to unprotected and guarded terminations. And when you get to the larger breakers, now we're into a much larger, and what we do here is these are like tie wraps. I think this is a better picture. So we require this tie wrap. You wrap this, you put this guard on here, and then you wrap that those conductors all the ways up as high as you can get them, and that really provides a really good level of protection for the electrical worker. There's the language in the code, 23062. Barriers shall be placed in service equipment such that no uninsulated, ungrounded service bus bar or service terminal is exposed to inadvertent contact by persons. Now, I left this in there, Donnie. This was the language. This was an exception that was put in the 17 cycle in 408.3 that recognizing the fact that if I leveraged the 6 disconnect rule and I had a panel board with 6 disconnects, I'm staring at aluminum or copper bus that has no protection. And there's nothing, I can't even de-energize that copper bus without calling the utility and having them pull that switch. So they put this exception in and they said, boy, you know, that's a concern. It really raised the awareness that I'm requiring you to put barriers where you have a main over current protective device. But if you're using 6 disconnects in a panel board and you have this big exposed copper or aluminum bus, there's nothing you can do to cover it. I'm giving you the allowance to just forget about a barrier. I think that's why you saw changes in the 6 disconnect rule in the 2020 cycle. So there's a good picture, Donnie. What is that? Is that utilizing the 6 disconnect rule? Because
No, that the top is a main.
oh, there it is. I see it.
So the top's the main, and the installer bought barriers and put on the lugs on the bottom. It's a feed through. I'm guessing, but I would guess that it might be a mobile home service. So you had a 200 amp main breaker on the top, and you had lugs on the bottom where you could extend the 200 amp circuit into the manufactured home, and then you had the other breaker spaces below that.
Okay.
So that, you know, the installer we certainly didn't make him take the barriers off, even though they were not required.
Oh, yeah. So I see the barrier down here.
Yeah. And then there's I was curious about those little, does that qualify as barriers on the main breaker on the top where they have those things pushed in to cover up the.
Well, here, so I got a couple concerns here. I mean, even when I look at this, I'm looking at an exposed bus right here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm putting a little barrier here, but I can have access to this. I have access to this entire bus, and then, you know, then you have this exposed portion up here. So
if you go back to the meter main, you know, the bus below the main breaker is exposed in all panels.
well, but here's the difference, though. I can, so if
Back up
if
and
I
get a
look at
picture
this,
of that whole, there you go.
if I turn this off, all of this is de-energized.
That's correct.
In the picture that you just showed here, if this
So-
is my main,
Yeah.
oh,
you
okay,
turn
so that
it
is
off
the
the
main,
entire-
and that would de-energize all of this.
That de-energizes all the bus below.
So
That's
why
correct.
do you need that barrier there?
You don't.
Okay. So really, this is what needs to be barriered off, which I don't know that does a very good job of doing that. Does it?
So you know, again, it was the installer put the barriers on those bottom lugs. We didn't make them do that, but they were there. We certainly were not going to make them take it off.
Right.
So then that particular breaker, you tighten up the terminals on the main breaker behind those little plugs, we'll call them. Move to the right of where you see the aluminum conductors going into the breaker. Can you circle that, Thomas? I can do it with my finger on my screen, but
right here.
So that's the service conductors going into the breaker.
Right.
And just to the right of that, those little black terminals.
Oh, right here.
Plugs. Yeah. So that covers up the terminals. And
Okay.
Hey, Donnie,
Yes.
Kevin Arnold here. I don't know if that would qualify as a barrier, as not knowing the exact dimensions, if that would pass the probe test as required in UL 67 for those little flaps, I would call them, I guess.
Okay.
So, if again, inadvertent contact, I mean, I could easily push through those flaps with that probe. So I don't think that would qualify.
So Kevin, you jumped in. I'm glad you jumped in. So we had the questions earlier about the probe. So that is part of the product standard, the probe.
Yes. Yep.
So
There it is. It's has definitive dimensions on it. Basically starts kind of a chamfer at about a 1/2 inch diameter up to a 3/4 inch diameter, and then the rest of the shaft is 3/4 inch in diameter. So I think that maybe that first part of that 1/2 inch would fit in there, would penetrate in there.
Yeah.
Therefore, not passing that test. And, also I know there's been some discussion around the barriers. So if a panel board per UL 67, if it is marked suitable, for use as service equipment, the manufacturers do provide a barrier kit or boot or whatever you want to call it. But then the panel board also has to be marked, install service barrier kit, and we have to put the catalog number, which would typically be part of that label on the door that you were looking at earlier as well. So, or it could say or equivalent.
Okay. So the one, Thomas, go back to the transfer switch. So that one, Kevin, if you remember that picture.
Hold on, let me find it.
Yeah, I think that had the white barrier, we'll call it.
That's
There it is.
correct.
Yep.
So would the probe go, if you inserted the probe from the top, could you reach the terminals? And I don't know the answer to that. We asked that question and after some length of time, not forever, but I do know the manufacturers have products that the certification agency has told us qualify as barriers now. But I'm guessing
Yeah,
that you shouldn't be able to reach your fingers over the top and reach the terminals, I guess.
Yeah, and then that whole inadvertent contact is a little subjective in the standard. And without seeing the top up there, I would assume that it probably, I don't want to say so, but I would think that that barrier is intended for that product. So one way you can either look and see if it's evident if such probe would fit in there, or another way it might be even easier to see if that barrier kit is listed in the enclosure on the door as part of the publication that comes with it, and that may answer the question pretty quickly. If it's in the instructions or on the door or something as a part number, and that is the part number, then I would agree it's been evaluated by the third party. If it's not, then further investigation, in my opinion, would be needed.
So that's what we did initially, right after the first of the year. There was nothing to indicate that it qualified as the barrier. The manufacturer went back to the certification agency, and after some span of time, we did get some documentation that for specific model numbers, it would qualify.
I guess a fail-safe would just be put a chain link fence around it, huh?
Yeah, there you go. But it's got to be about 7 foot tall.
Or like, with Thomas, could you bury like one of those in-ground fence for pets with a shock collar? I don't know.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and your shock collar would be 120 volts. Now, Kerry Lovelace is asking, when we had this image up here, Donnie, he says, "Is that listed?" So, I think he has a good question. This is listed as suitable for use as service entrance equipment, probably, but it looks like it's pretty old.
Yeah, it is, and that's what we see from time to time. You get an installation where I'm going to speculate and say this was on a mobile home installation that the power had been off for some time, And so they need us to go out and approve the installation because it's been off for a while. And we go and look, and we've got an installation that, where it had been served 20 or 25 years ago. It's been off for 3 years or 2 years or whatever the number is. And now you've got to go back and, do you make them just take the whole thing out and replace it, or is there some retrofit product? And I think that the little buttons or whatever they are that go in, I think, that was an attempt to say, when this breaker was built, there was no such thing as barriers. So was this a retrofit, something that somebody built? And in all honesty, I don't remember. I don't remember how we resolved this one. I think we probably replaced it
Okay.
because
Yeah,
it had some other things also.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a wire strip gauge on the side of that main breaker. Those wires may have been overstripped in excess. And maybe the intent was that the insulation would be right up to the molded case, or actually recessed into the molded case a little bit to provide a degree of, I'm going to say, unintentional touch safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now to your point, Donnie, about the probe. So I guess I know where you're going with this picture is, are those little plastic barriers suitable for meeting the code requirement of a barrier?
Right. And they certainly would keep you from touching the, the terminals if you stuck your finger straight in, but wouldn't be difficult to go over the top and reach the.
Yeah. Or even in between the sides here. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
Now, if this is listed product, what would you do in this case? Would you go back to the manufacturer and see if they have different barriers, or would you? How would you? I mean, how do you handle this?
Yeah, you'd have to ask both the manufacturer and, for me, the manufacturer and the certification agency. Does that meet the requirements in 230.62?
Right. Now this one's kind of clear because I mean, well, I hate the way they jeez, oh man.
Hey, Thomas.
Yeah.
And also in the product standard, when it does talk about inadvertent contact, the sentence extends on, and it says, while servicing any field-connected load terminals, including neutrals, branch circuit equipment, grounding, stuff of that nature. So I guess when you look at that previous picture with the clear, phenolic or whatever that was on it, plexiglass maybe, and, would you be doing any work up there then? So would any inadvertent contact occur in that area, or is there I guess a bigger, wider picture could show maybe any field servicing on load terminations would be further down? I don't know, just food for thought.
Yeah. That's a good question. What do you think of that, Donnie? Opportunities all around us, Donnie.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. I mean, I love, what's really nice is the artistic nature of the conductors, I love the way they cross them and put those conductors in. And I like this picture here because it really shows you have your grounded conductor, your neutral, you have your equipment grounding connection, you have your main bonding jumper, and then you have your grounding electrode conductor, all on this one bar. And that really helps us see all of that bonding that goes on inside of service entrance equipment. Now, what was your point here, Donnie?
It was just a picture of the barriers.
Okay.
I tried to get some pictures of barriers from several different manufacturers, just to say that they're all accomplishing the same thing. They might look a little different, but they do look, but they all cover up the terminals.
Well, you're training your guys good. Look at it. He even wrote torqued. Like it. Love it. We already looked at this one, and and what I noticed on this one was their barriers. I see one wasn't in place, but it was still installed. Well, it's sort of taken off right here. So,
Right.
but those are where the barriers go, because you don't have to worry about the top portion, because that's all covered anyway and enclosed and barriered off. And there's your close up of your barriers.
So as a helpful inspector, when it was coming loose there, I just pushed it back in and snapped it in.
Do you lick your fingers first before you do that?
Yeah, because there's no meter in there.
Okay. All right. So now this one doesn't have it, but this was installed in 2008 using the 2008 National Electrical Code, and we're not retroactive on the National Electrical Code, so you wouldn't have to bring. If I changed that breaker, would you require me to put a barrier on it?
So it's an interesting thought. I've had some discussions with a variety of people that I understand. That service got turned off, and so it was off and required a new release. And right now we're using the 2020 NEC, so they're in the process of changing that one to make it comply with the 2020 NEC.
So would they have to increase the service size then? I think we've got 20 up there, but will we need to have a minimum of 60?
Well, you would, it's an installation. Well, and we were going to get to all this in the program. So right now you have to have barriers, and right now you have to have a main for the enclosure. And my question that I was hoping that we'd get to, and I think we will here in a little bit, is the requirement is that you have one disconnect per enclosure, right? So does it require that to have a main breaker in it? I don't have the answer to that. You can't have more than one, but that one only has one because there's a 20 amp branch circuit, and it's feeding that's for a service for an irrigation system at a set of condominiums.
Well, wait a second though. So if this is a 2008 installation, I'm allowed to have up to 6 disconnects in there. If I just have one, I'm good.
That's correct. In 2008, and it passed in 2008, and it was energized and operated for a number of years. Then it got turned off. So now they want to turn it back on based on the 2020 NEC.
Well, and then you're speaking not so much from a barrier. I mean, there's a barrier issue, but you don't have to worry about the changes in the 6 disconnect rule for this. It would just be the barrier. Well, yeah, you would have to worry about the 6 disconnect rule.
There's no provisions in there. In 23071, there's no provisions for anything except one main per enclosure.
Right. So for everybody else who's maybe not following this, 23071 talks about the maximum number of disconnects, and we have. Let me just go to that question since we're on that topic. 23071 dealt with maximum number of service disconnects, and we can have up to 6, and we changed that 6 disconnect rule. Basically, you're still allowed to have a 6 disconnects, but you will no longer see a panel board with up to 6 disconnects because of the compartmentalization requirements. And if you look at the there's the language. So 230.71b, the parent text says 2 to 6 disconnects shall be permitted, blah blah blah, all that good stuff, and it has to be one of the following combinations. Hold on. I think I deleted them. So here's I'm going to read it to everybody since I don't have it in my slide deck. You can either have separate enclosures with a main service disconnecting means in each enclosure. So Donnie, let's go back to that image. Go back to this image of breaker in a box or closed circuit breaker. This one right here, right? So this says a separate enclosure with a main service disconnecting means in each enclosure. So that would be considered a main service disconnecting means, right?
Yeah, that particular installation, the service going to the building had a I think a 2-gang meter socket or maybe 2 meter sockets mounted side by side with connected together. I can't remember what the rest of it looked like, but this was the main for the irrigation system, and then they may have had one of the condo units may have been on the other meter. I don't know.
Now,
So yes, this was the main breaker for the irrigation system.
so
Thomas,
yeah.
I would say, I mean, it's hard to see the UL label or the label on the door that's raised up there, but I would highly suspect that this is probably listed to UL 67 as a panel board.
Yes, I think so. It's a main lug panel board.
Yep.
Okay,
And
so
we look at
2008 as long as you,
B2.
so in
Right.
2008, you could have bought that 2-circuit panel board and put either 2 single pole breakers in it or 1 2-pole breaker in it, and it would have been suitable for use as service equipment. Maybe suitable for use only as service equipment because it looks like the neutral is bonded to the enclosure.
Yep.
So, so it would have been fine in the 2008 code, whether you
Right.
put 1 breaker in it or 2 breakers in it.
right, but as part of the 2020 code, if that's listed as a panel board,
Right?
then you fall under 230.71B2, which says panel boards with a main service disconnecting means in each panel board enclosure. So
Right.
to carry Lovelace's point, this is a main lug only panel,
Yeah.
and that would not be permitted under the 2020 National Electrical Code. But to Ryan Jackson's point that 90.2A applies to all installation of equipment, to the installation of equipment, and this equipment is already installed. So technically, Donnie, you would have a hard time saying, because that's already installed and this was installed in 2008, you'd have a hard time requiring them to bring that up to the 2020 code, wouldn't you?
I guess everybody I mean, everybody would view that their own way. When it gets turned off and we have to say it, we have to tell the utility to turn it back on. Our release of that says it complies with the current requirements. So we would require, they could put a 2-pole breaker in there if they wanted 1 main. The main is the easy part. The barriers is the part that I don't know how you'd get barriers for that.
Right, because this all would have to be barriered off.
You have to barrier the whole thing off, and I don't know how you'd accomplish that.
Nope, and there's no
You get around the main by just putting a 2-pole breaker and only using one side of the 2-pole breaker for the circuit that was supplying the receptacle that the irrigation system's plugged into.
Right. Okay.
So
All
what
right.
if you had one of those that was, had places for 6 breakers?
Well, you
Main
couldn't use
panel
that.
with up to 6 2-pole breakers. It could have actually been a 12-circuit panel and could have been completely fine before.
Right. But you can't use it today because you'd have all of that exposed bus. I mean, the whole purpose, and that's what drove the requirement in 230.71, the changes there, was the fact that they recognized that we're going to require a barrier for our service, like in 408.3. But when you have this type of scenario where you might have 6 disconnects in here, you've got this entire exposed bus, and we provide an exception so that you don't have to bury that off, because you can't. I mean, this one here, you might be able to design something, but when you're looking at a panel board that that has that big bus, like if you didn't have this main in this picture, and you just had 6 breakers here, but you've got all of this exposed bus that you would have to barrier. There's nothing that you could do to do that. You wouldn't be able to make a product to barrier the entire bus off of that. So they provided the exception, but then in the 20 code they said, look, we're going to do away with that. You have 4 choices. one, separate enclosures with a main service disconnecting means in each enclosure, which would be like your fusible disconnect switches, right? A good example of that would be, we have a picture of that, Donnie, like this, right? So these breaker in a boxes, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But if I only had 6 of these, and I didn't have this main device, I didn't have one of these, then I would be permitted to do this because each one of these is enclosed. And this could be a fusible switch or a breaker in a box, enclosed circuit breaker, that would meet the separate enclosures with a main service disconnecting means in each enclosure.
That's correct.
Right. So then the second option is a panel board with a main, and that would be the image that we were just looking at here. A panel board with a main service disconnecting means in each panel board enclosure. So these types of applications would clearly meet that letter of the law. And then you have switchboards is the third one, which I don't believe we have any pictures of switchboards, but switchboards where there is only one service disconnect in each separate vertical section, where there are barriers separating each vertical section. So now, if I would have had a switchboard where I had two breakers, one over top of each other in that same vertical section, I wouldn't be able to do that. I would have to put each breaker up to 6 in its own vertical section with a barrier in between. And then the fourth option is your service disconnects in switch gear or metering centers, where each disconnect is located in a separate compartment. So, and this is the one, and I know Kevin Arnold is knee deep in this one as well. Probably other manufacturers are knee deep in this one, trying to figure out how to handle meter centers where there is no solution on the market that meets the requirement of the National Electrical Code, because they cannot be compartmentalized. And that's the requirement here, is in a separate compartment for each disconnect. All right, so we beat that
And
one.
Thomas, while we're there,
Yeah.
I've submitted a TIA so that if you had existing equipment that that was installed earlier on a different edition of the code, if you had that 6-gang meter center with 2 meters installed and you got 4 more tenants going in the shopping center later, and that later happens to be after you've adopted the 2020 NEC, right now you wouldn't be able to allow them to use those other 4 meter spaces.
Right. So, like in this picture that I'm showing here on the right,
That's right.
that would be probably a good example of this guy right here. I'm gonna make it bigger. These.
So yeah, we had shopping centers and business parks and that sort of stuff with, where they built those spaces with the intent of having 5 or 6 tenants, one in each tenant slot. When they initially did the building, they only installed 2 of them because nobody rented the spaces. Now they go back to rent the spaces, and if you look at the text carefully, 230.71, I'm not sure you can allow the rest of those breakers to be installed now.
Right.
If the TIA passes, then it would permit you to do that. You could do the same thing with a main lug 1200 amp panel board, and you installed 2 or 3 breakers knowing you're going to add on to the building later on. But right now, the way the text is written, it's, if the TIA doesn't pass, I think you'd be hard pressed to allow that 3rd or 4th or 5th disconnect to go in there, even though that's what it was intended to do when you built it.
Right.
Yeah, Johnny, I suspect, there's going to be a lot of PIs around 230.71 for the 2023. Because we've struggled with the fact that when they added part 4 in there and put the term metering centers, that's not defined anywhere. Now, a lot of manufacturers, such as Eaton, we call them, there's a version called meter packs, which doesn't have that main disconnect, and it has all the individual meter disconnects, if you will, and those areas are not compartmentalized. And then there's another term that's used that's called meter stacks, which would actually come with a main service disconnect that would then feed to all those individual, call them tenant breakers at that point. And, that then, you would meet part two. And the products that we commonly refer to as meter centers are actually listed to UL 67 under panel boards. And, that's where we kind of think, hey, having the one main disconnect ahead meet part, B2 in the requirements for panel boards there. So it's going to be interesting come, January with all the new PIs. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, you want to move to, let's take a look at the next question, Donnie.
Okay.
Is the service equipment for premises wiring system one piece of equipment or a collection and assembly of multiple pieces of equipment?
This is just a different set of words for what we've been talking about with the, is the enclosure, what is the service equipment? Is the enclosure part of this, is it the service equipment is the breaker in the panel board? If we backed up and looked, or go ahead and open up one of those panel boards that has a main breaker in it, that's, again, that's a collection of multiple pieces of equipment.
I see. So here's the way I interpreted that question was like on this one here, my service equipment is really in this case it's one switch
disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, but if that wasn't there and I had 6 of these, so to that, 6 disconnect rule perspective, each of these would be service equipment.
Right.
So I could have up to 6. If I look at this application here, I have this is service equipment here, this is service equipment here, this is service equipment here, and this is service equipment.
That's correct.
Now, what your point was, which I think is valid, that if I look at the enclosure like this, or say this here,
yeah,
this is the entire assembly
piece of equipment or multiple pieces of equipment. The panel board is the bus work behind all that, right?
Right.
And the enclosure is an Article 312 cutout box.
Right.
And the breaker, the main breaker is a listed circuit breaker, and the branch breakers below it are listed circuit breakers.
And all of those meet the definition of equipment.
All those meet the definition of equipment. And so what we're still trying to find out is, what is the service equipment?
Well, I think it's very clear that this is service equipment, not this, not the all of the little parts like the ground and the neutral bar and these fittings. It's the entire assembly that's listed as service equipment or suitable for use as service equipment or suitable for use only as service equipment. So it's not any one individual component, it's how they're all put together in an assembly. That's my opinion.
That's probably how most people in the world have looked at it, and it's probably what I'm going to speculate it's probably what the committee thinks of, but if you look at that definition again, you have to think again.
I think the definition is very clear now. Now that we've gone through all that, geez, yeah. Yeah, I think we got some work to do. And this is my Kevin Arnold and myself. We're both on panel 10. So Kevin, I think we got some splaining to do. All right, so let's take a look at the next question.
It's going to be interesting.
You what?
It's going to be interesting and fun.
It sure is. All right, so let's take a look at. We already said that one. Let's take a look at this question. Does the NEC include marking requirements that will identify the service equipment? If so, are those factory or field markings or a combination? Now, in 230.66 and in 230.7, there are marking requirements. And, my gut reaction to this, Donnie, was some markings will be a part of the listing. Some markings may be required to be field applied. And the reason I said that was, especially if you're suitable for use as service equipment, these types of labels where I have to identify that is a service disconnect, I can't necessarily put that on in the factory because
You don't
may
know
not
how
use
to
it.
use the equipment.
Right. So I may put this label in the equipment, but you're still going to have to put that label on it because it is required as part of the installation requirements in the National Electrical Code. But then I may, like in this case here, I have the label that says suitable for use as service entrance equipment, but you would still have to label this overcurrent device as the service disconnect, right? Oh, and here's a close-up of the label, suitable for use as service equipment. So that is all in there, and that's a part of the UL listing. And it'll tell you here, we'll have suitable for ungrounded or overhead entry, have breaker terminal suitable for aluminum copper. So there's a lot of things that are listed on this label that are required by the UL standards, which you would not put in the field. This would be done by the manufacturer. But you may have to put some labels on in the. So that's the 230.66 marking requirement shall be listed for field evaluated, right? So it has to be marked to identify it as being suitable for use of service equipment. But if you buy listed product, then it's going to have that marking on it from the manufacturer. But then this one here in 237B, I think, is the one that may have to be put on in the field, because I may not be able to put that on from the manufacturer if it's suitable for use as. I can put it on from the manufacturer's perspective if it's suitable for use only as. But again, that's going to be dependent upon the manufacturer. Now there is.
So again, Thomas, if you look through that part 5 and part 6 of 230,
Yep.
Just from an organizational standpoint, the requirements are interesting the way they're organized, and it's probably because they were added one piece at a time rather than stepping back and looking at the whole picture. And if you set out to do that today, you probably wouldn't organize them exactly the same way.
Right.
Because interestingly enough, in the 230.66 section is titled marking, and the B part of that is meter sockets, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with marking at all. Go ahead with the rest of your story, Thomas. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No. I was just looking at that. So meter sockets shall not be considered service equipment, but shall be listed and rated for the voltage. You're right, but I guess the reason they may have put that in there is because you wouldn't want to have to mark the metering socket. I don't know. That's a good question. I was just going to bring everybody's attention to. Let me try to do this. Share content. Share that. And I'm going to switch this. So if you're familiar with product IQ, which was the white book, if you put in the information like panel board, you'll find that QEUI is the guide information for panel boards. This gives you a lot of the information that you would have found in the white book, if you remember the white book. But this is the now the new white book, which is all online these days. There's related information, and we have panel board marking guides. So because we're in the marking discussion, Donnie, I thought it would be kind of cool to talk about, show a resource, which I think is a really great resource on the UL Product IQ, which goes through all of the markings that you'll find on a panel board. And you'll see the short circuit current ratings. The suitable for use of service equipment is on page 14. So if we go to page 14, you'll see the marking. So that was, I think, number 9, 7, 8. Here it is, suitable for use as service equipment. And this tells you what the UL requires the manufacturer to put on the product when it's listed and supplied in the field. So it talks about the snap toggle switches, all this other good stuff, circuit breakers, fuse combination. So there's all kinds of details on what the marking requirements will be. Now, again, you'll see in here, there's probably, this is the date of this document is not in line with the 2020 National Electrical Code. I would hope that UL is looking at updating this, but they will give you all of the what's factory installed and where I have an allowance to give you a label that you would field install. All of that would be in the marking guides. And again, so you'll see the suitable for use as service equipment install no more than 6 main disconnecting means. So that's no longer a part of the UL standard. I believe that's all been changed already because it was in the 2017 code. But this is an important thing, and I think a great resource for those on the phone that remember Product IQ. And how I found this was I just did a Google search for Product IQ, and just you can enter the information that you need. Basically, type in panel board, type in any product, and you can get to all of this great documentation and information. I just at least wanted to share that with everybody to make sure that they knew that was a good reference for. All right, so let's go back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay, Donnie, we still got time. Let's move on. What question were we? Oops. Wrong slide deck. Are meter enclosure installations part of the NEC? We already talked about this. We answered that up front, remember?
Yeah, so you got the requirements in 312 that cover meter enclosures. So and I guess depending on where you go in the country, in some places the utility provides and maybe in some places continues to control and maintain the meter socket, meter enclosure. So I guess from that standpoint, it could or it may or may not be part of the NEC depending on your local utility requirements.
Good point.
So if it's not part of the NEC, if that's a piece of utility equipment, then it would be outside the scope of the NEC, and because there is a requirement in the in 23066 that that it be listed.
Yeah.
So we, in our area, we see meter sockets, meter enclosures that are not listed, but they're utility controlled, and so we consider those to be outside the scope of the NEC.
Absolutely.
Right or wrong, we could be either, but that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
We're sticking to it. We don't want to step on toes. That's the key. Is surge protection a component of the service equipment? Is that protection required for all services? I would say it can, again, we had expansion in 23067. It can be included in service entrance equipment. I wouldn't call it an excess. I wouldn't call it, I guess if you put it in the service equipment, it would be a part of the service equipment. You could call it an accessory of service equipment, but it doesn't have to be in the service equipment. And we talked about this earlier, that there's that exception that lets me put it downstream. But I could make it an integral part of the service equipment, or I could attach it and to the side of the service equipment and wire it to a breaker inside.
And keep in mind, it is covered in Part 5 of Article 230, which is titled service equipment, general. Just for you panel 10 guys to think about as you're moving forward.
Wait, say that one more time.
So the requirement in 230.67 that covers surge protection is in part 5 of Article 230, which is titled Service Equipment, General. So if it's not service equipment, general, then should it be in part 5?
Well, it would be, sir. It would be a general requirement for service equipment, regardless of where it's at, right? Where else would you put it? It wouldn't be a part of service entrance conductor. Wouldn't be a part of underground services.
Wouldn't you just put it in, what is it, Article 245 or whatever, wherever surge protection?
242.
242. I mean, you don't put the circuit breaker requirements in Article 230. They're in Article 240.
Oh.
So it's an interest.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's just a panel 10 thing, for you to think about.
Well, panel 10 is
You
infallible.
guys, every chance I get, Thomas.
Panel 10 is infallible, Donnie.
I know that.
Yeah. So
Donnie, in regards to the requirement for surge here, it says supplying dwelling units. If I was building a new home and I had a tent pole, would I be required to have surge protection on that?
We haven't required people, because it's not a dwelling, it's a temporary service pole. We have not required that. Now we are requiring it for manufactured homes, for the services for manufactured homes, because those do qualify as dwelling units. And we've actually looked at a few RV services where it's kind of an interesting thing in our area. RVs are not intended to be used as dwelling units, but we do have people that live in those forever. So we've had where they're using them as dwellings, where we're applying the dwelling rules.
yeah. And what I'm showing here is that you can integrate that surge. So I like what you said there, Donnie. I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm sure you made a public input, right?
Not yet, but the time's not up.
Right. All right, so we have 5 more minutes. Is there anything specific you want to go over before we close this session, Donnie?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think when we sent out meeting notices to the normal list of Central Alabama Division folks, I think we sent this list of questions out. So, if somebody's got something in there that they really want to address, we can certainly skip to that one.
Yeah, if there's anybody online who like out on YouTube land, if you could put in the chat if you had received this from the Alabama chapter, or anybody on WebEx that would put it in your notes, you can put it in the chat box and say, hey, cover question number, whatever.
So the other interesting one, I guess, Thomas, if nobody's put it in there real quick, that we could talk about is the emergency disconnect. That's something that's new for the 2020, and for those that hadn't had to deal with that yet, it's might be worth a minute or two of our time.
Okay, so I'm looking for that question. Here it is. That's number 14. So are emergency disconnects also service disconnects? If not, what is the difference? And we go to 230.85 in that case. And I call this one, Donnie, lovingly, I call it the firefighter disconnect, because, I mean, I know this was near and dear to your heart because your boy's in the fire department, right? In Birmingham?
Yes.
Yep. But this is for first responders, and they added language. I'm just going to show the language in 23085 for 1 and 2 family dwelling units. All service conductors shall terminate in a disconnecting means that have a short circuit current rating equal to or greater than the available fault current installed, and blah blah blah. If more than one disconnect is provided, okay, service disconnects can be marked either as emergency disconnect, service disconnect. So that tells me if I have an outdoor panel board with where I have a main breaker that is a service disconnect, it can double as my emergency disconnect, and I'd have to label it that way. The second item is when I have that meter disconnect, which would not be a service disconnect, which would not be service equipment because I'm not doing any bonding in there. And I believe you guys do that in your area, right? You put does your utility require a meter disconnect ahead of that meter?
You wouldn't see it on homes. It's only for 480 volt services.
Okay. Okay. But if you did have one on a home, then that would not be service equipment because the utility wouldn't want you in there with the ground equipment, grounding conductor, etc. But you would have to label that emergency disconnect, meter disconnect, not service equipment. And then finally, they have this emergency disconnect, not service disconnect. And that's like if you had a fusible disconnect or a breaker in a box or, enclosed circuit breaker, that would not be service equipment. Why would you do that, Dawn?
Why would you do that? That was my question.
No. That was my question. I hit you first.
So I've had that discussion with a number of people, and I think there are probably some areas of the country where maybe in urban renewal, maybe brownstone homes in the big cities in the Northeast where people's service equipment is in the basement, and there may not be any place outside to install it. I think they were trying to accommodate some of those areas that had that difficulty.
Okay.
I don't really know. Like you say, I don't think anybody here would ever buy an additional switch to put on the outside and say it's not service equipment and then put their service disconnect on the inside. I just don't see anybody. They love you guys, Thomas, but they're not going to buy two of your products. If they can just buy one and accomplish everything they need.
Man. Well,
Hey, to add, Thomas, if you don't mind, or Donnie, if you don't mind, add a little commentary to that. So,
good.
If it's a new structure, then obviously there's a little bit more design flexibility. But say if the outside equipment, I don't know, say an ice storm, hurricane, anything of that nature damaged the outdoor equipment, and now you had to reinstall a meter base, and it's on the 2020, and now you need emergency disconnect as well, which is readily accessible on the outside. There is a product that is coming that would allow you to have a emergency disconnect, not service equipment, allow you to run a 3-wire from the meter to it, and then from it into a main breaker load center that's existing. Therefore you wouldn't have to worry about, separating, the grounds and the neutrals on the indoor main breaker load center then. So there's some niche installations, I would say, that where a product like that, I believe, would benefit from the surveys that we've done. So.
All right. Well, while we're talking about this, because we're at 4:30, I'm displaying right now, Donnie, for everybody and I'm going to do that for my YouTube people, the Menti code for signing out, because we're at the end of that 2 hours, and there's people. I just noticed Stephen Curtin. Hopefully, it's the Menti code for sign out. We did a sign in the beginning. The sign out code is go to menti.com and go 76, 78, and 75. 76, 78, and 75. Yep, you got the right numbers. They're scrolling on the bottom for those of you on YouTube. Use that as your sign out. I think, Donnie, we can continue this discussion a little bit for those who want to hang in there. We still have, just as a for instance, I'm just going to do just a check on YouTube. We have about 188 people on YouTube still watching. I'm not sure how many on WebEx, and I'm not sure how many people on. I could never figure out how many people are watching on Facebook. So, and we do have Amos Lawrence that said hey to everybody. I know you know Amos, right, Bonnie?
Absolutely.
Yep, Jody Wages was on Facebook, and he said that he remembered when I didn't have so much gray hair. And you know what it is, Jody? I got a tan, so it just stands out a little bit more. Daryl Heffley was online too, pointing out about the throughput lugs, and then Brian Rock was online too. So, so at least everybody has the Menti code. So let's if you want just chat a little bit more about this. I'm open for it.
Hey, Donnie.
Go ahead. Who was that? Go ahead and talk. Who that was, but I heard the "Hey Donnie" part, and then he went away. Still there, Donnie?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, buddy.
Hey, sorry about that. I don't know that I got signed in right on the beginning of this, as far as sign in part.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Andrew. Let me mark you down. If I'll check it when I download the spreadsheet. I'll check for your name.
Hey, sorry about that. I don't know that I got. Okay, so but if I sign out, I mean I need to do that anyway, right?
Yeah, at least sign out. So go to menti.com and sign out with 76, 78, 75. If for those who I don't have a beginning and end, I'll probably shoot a note out just to make sure I don't miss anybody. So, go with that.
Okay, so but if I sign out.
All right, I'm just muted you, Andrew, because I was getting some feedback there. But
Okay.
excellent. So Ryan pointed out, Donnie, that if you place an emergency disconnect outside, it immediately meets the definition of service equipment, though, meaning especially if you have the overcurrent device inside, right? And he goes, putting a sticker on it doesn't change that fact, which I think he has a good point.
I agree, Thomas. And we've had some discussions at IAEI about possibly submitting a PI for the 2023 to and at least a couple of us have talked and said that that item 3 is really sort of an exception. I mean, if you put a main on the outside, it's the service disconnect, and so. I do understand. I've talked to a lot of people in other areas of the country that think that appears to be much more important to their installations than it would be for us. I mean, we've always had some mains on the outside where you couldn't get back to back, and so that's most of our contractors are just going to install a main breaker on the outside. It's going to be the service equipment. It's going to be the emergency disconnect. It's going to meet all those requirements. And I think that's what we'll see. The majority of our installations, I think that's what we'll see.
Gotcha.
So Donnie, that main, you refer to it as a main. Does that main then have overcurrent protection in it, whether it be a fuse or a breaker, circuit breaker?
Yes, it's a breaker. Yeah.
So if it was a non-auto switch, then would you be classifying it as a main? So in essence, to try to describe, if I can do this justice, if I had...
It's a molded case switch.
Yes, molded case switch, yep.
Yeah. So when I look at the requirements for the service disconnect, it still seems to fit that description, doesn't it? It disconnects all the ungrounded conductors. And then the requirement, historically, the requirement has been you had a service disconnect and then you had the overcurrent protection, and it was either part of the disconnect or it was immediately adjacent there too. And so in this case, it wouldn't be immediately adjacent there too. It would be on the inside instead of on the outside, immediately adjacent to it. So that would be the real difference between what I guess the requirement is trying to do is allow you to have the disconnect in one place and the overcurrent protection in another place.
Yeah, so in essence, again, if you're not touching, you've got a single meter base, meter socket on the outside,
Right.
and it feeds into a main breaker panel board on the inside.
Right.
If you had to do modification or install new equipment on the outside because of whatever reason,
Right.
now you're required to have an emergency disconnect. If you were to go with a meter breaker combo, as we typically call them, now that panel board load center on the inside, your grounds and neutrals are still all bonded there, together. So you'd have to separate them. So in lieu of having to do that, we do have a product that is a non-auto switch, a multi-case switch, so no overcurrent protection, and solely intended just for an emergency disconnect and on and off, and not to have to do 10,000 cycles and such, but to be installed on the outside in that readily accessible location, therefore would permit you to not have to modify that load center on the inside as far as the grounds and neutrals were concerned.
So the goal is not necessarily about the service disconnect or the emergency disconnect. The goal is really to have an exception to the requirements for the equipment ground or the neutral, however you would want to say it, because you would have the neutral bonded to the enclosure in two places, one outside and one inside.
Correct.
So really, that's where in my mind, that's where the exception needs to be, is in Article 250, not necessarily in 230. But I understand that there's a lot of room for opinions. There's probably a lot of opinions that are smarter than mine, but in my mind, it seems that that's what we're trying to accomplish, is an exception to 250, not an exception to 230. But again, that's that's one person's opinion. We've used a similar thing, Kevin, with service changes here through the years. We only started inspections in October of '88, and so we've got thousands of homes that were built before October, that were started before.
Hey, Tom, this is Ryan. Do you mind if I jump in for 2 seconds?
Yeah, no, sure. Go ahead, Ryan.
We've used a similar thing, Kevin, with service changes here through the years.
Mute your YouTube thing, though. I think Ryan wanted to say something, Donnie.
Go ahead.
You there, Ryan?
In for 2 seconds. I've got a delay on my end. Never mind. It's going to be too difficult, but thank you. Never mind.
All right, brother. All right, Donnie. So I'm just looking at the logging out. So we got people have found the Menti code out, and
I've got a delay. Don't worry about it. Just forget it. We're good. Sorry about that.
All right. There, Ryan? Okay, so we got the Menti code out. So Donnie, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Looks like people are logging out of WebEx. I don't know if so is Kevin Arnold still around? So is there other things we need to chat about there?
So I was just going to tell Kevin that we had on older homes where there was no inspection when they were built, and the service disconnect was a main breaker in a panel halfway across the house. It probably never complied with the NEC, because I think that service disconnect was supposed to be either outside or inside nearest the point of entry of the service conductors. But when there was no inspections, people installed those wherever it was convenient. And so we would get repair jobs, service jobs where the meter socket failed or whatever, the service entrance conductors were damaged or failed or whatever. And we would always make people put an overcurrent device on the outside, and then we would have them bond the neutral in the service disconnect and then go inside and bond it again because there was only 3 wires in the cable. And we would tell them it was wrong. We would tell them it was a code violation. But if we bonded it on both ends, if you had a fault, at least it would turn off. And we always felt like that was better than not putting an overcurrent device on the outside. And we certainly didn't want to have people, while a storm went through and the service got tore off their house, to have to be in the dark, and then tear up their house, tear the sheetrock out of their house all the way through to get it, to replace that feeder cable. If it was a simple installation of 6 feet or 10 feet of a service cable in a basement, we would repair the feeder too. But it was just a way to work around an existing condition that, in most cases, the people that were living in the house at that time probably were not the original owners anyway, just bought it, and it was unfortunate. And at least we got them some protection. So we got them some overcurrent protection on the cable. And we realized all along that bonding was not permitted on both ends of it, but it would, if you bonded it on both ends, it would, if you had a fault, at least it would turn the breaker off.
Yeah, gotcha. That's definitely, an improvement based upon what the existing installation was. So
Yeah,
understand
so
completely.
this would really be a similar situation. I think you're going to run into that item 3 more so on repair jobs and that sort of stuff. And it would seem to me that if we worked, if we could accept that less than ideal but workable solution, you might put the exception in 250 as opposed to 230. But
Yeah.
That's okay. Either one works.
250, 251, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, Donnie, we're past our time, and I've been, as people are dropping off WebEx, your image keeps moving around, so people get to see a corner of your face, your entire face.
Yeah.
I've been trying to keep up with it, but we had some great attendance, and remember what I'm going to do, Donnie, is I'm going to download this video. And, as everybody else, I did tell everybody that we are creating a central division of the IAEI Alabama division YouTube channel. So we will load this up as the first video for that channel and kick off probably maybe we do some more programs in the future along this line so that we can keep putting information out there and raising awareness and education. So we had a lot of people online. I'll let you know the final count, and we'll download that the sign in and sign out sheets and get that over to you and Regina.
All right. Thanks, Thomas. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Donnie. Thanks to everybody joining in on Facebook and YouTube. Paul Dabrowski, Kevin Arnold. Thanks, Kevin, for your contributions. And Randy and all of those who chatted and whatnot. And Carrie Lovelace, thank you very much for joining in as well. Great discussion. Susan, appreciate you dialing in as well. So this stuff will be out there on YouTube. Check it out later as well. And stay safe and stay healthy. And appreciate you dialing in. All right, Donnie. Good job, Daddy. Appreciate you dialing in, buddy. That ends the program. So The sign out for those of you who are still out there in YouTube land is down below. Boom. There you go. Lost Donnie. And I am closing out the WebEx. So if I can figure out how to do that, and then I'm going to close the WebEx out, and then I will close out the YouTube. There we go. End meeting. End meeting. Where's my YouTube? Live stream. Let's see what we got on live stream. We still have 130 people out there. Thank you. Remember to subscribe to my channel. And look forward to we're going to have future editions and future stuff that we're going to have on this technical on my session. I'm getting a new computer, so I'm going to be able to stream and record more often, hopefully, if time allows, my wife allows. But I'm creating a channel for the Alabama Central Division, so we're going to be loading some videos up there as well. I'm creating a channel for the West Virginia chapter of the IAEI. And what's coming in the future as well is a YouTube channel that is going to be for the Western section. So the Western section meeting this year of the IAEI will be digital, and we're going to do it just like we did it today, probably, maybe a little bit more professional, because this is a totally new setup for me. So, but in any case, I hope you got something out of the program today. I appreciate you dialing in, and remember, hit that like button and subscribe, and share your information. We learn from each other. So thanks, take care, stay safe, and all that jazz. Sign off. Oh, go to I know what I do. Over here, and I say end.